Hello and welcome to Houston Indie Podcast Society. I am Jared, and I'm here with Ming and Carrie.
Hey, everyone.
We are very excited to have Lauren Shippen here with us. If you're not familiar with Lauren, you have been living under a rock for a long time, apparently. So Lauren is a writer, director, storyteller. 30 Under 30. She was awarded Movie Maker Magazine and Austin Film Festival's 25 Screenwriters to Watch. She's a co-founder and CEO of Atypical Artists. She is all over the place. So if you're not familiar, get familiar because she has written some amazing podcasts. Speaking of podcasts, why don't you go ahead and introduce some of the podcasts that you have?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for that great introduction and for having me. It's so good to talk to you guys. And yeah, I've worn a lot of hats in podcasting, but primarily I'm a fiction podcaster. And the thing I'm most known for and that kind of kicked off my career is a show called The Bright Sessions, which is about people with supernatural abilities in therapy. And I've also written 3 books in that world. It's airing its last season right now. And I've also written a show for Marvel, actually an adaptation of the graphic novel Marvels from the 90s. And I recently wrote a Stranger Things podcast about Robin's character from season 3, which is super, super fun. And right now I have a show coming out called Bridgewater. That's a horror podcast with fabulous podcaster Aaron Menke, starring Misha Collins. It's a horror fiction about the Bridgewater Triangle, which is this really spooky area of Massachusetts that, like, go and Google it right now. It's so fascinating. Or Google it after the stream. Don't let it distract you. But it's an interesting deep dive.
Yeah, it's a very interesting show. I've actually been listening to it, and
thanks.
it's gotten very good. I was very happy to see you and Aaron working together on a project because obviously Aaron Mankey is very well known for his research and his ability to tell stories. So you two working together was a very good thing to happen to the podcasting world.
It's been super fun. I met Aaron at at South by Southwest like many years ago, and we ended up just getting barbecue for like 4 hours, as you do when you're at South by, and have been friends ever since. And it was just so exciting to actually get to like work with him on something.
When in Texas barbecue.
Yeah, I'm so jealous of you guys getting to have that all the time.
So let's talk about some of the other podcasts that you've done. You had the AM archives, the college tapes. You already talked about the Surviving Hawkins, Passenger List. You played Larkin on Arcs. How was that playing D&D? Was that your first experience playing D&D, or have you done that before?
I had played a couple of games before. Actually was like in a D&D web series many years ago called Natural 20 that had one season with Escapist magazine, and it was really fun and unfortunately short-lived. But Arcs was the first time that I really like got to play a consistent character and really like do a campaign for a while. And unfortunately, like, the pandemic hit and then our DM moved back to England. And so it just like became impossible to kind of keep it up with the time zones and everything. But it's something I want to get back into. Do you guys all play D&D ever?
Yes, I played and actually had a D&D podcast.
Really?
Yes. And I don't know, Carrie, what about you?
I've played a few times in my life and never really had a core group that was really into it. So we never really got very far.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I have the same thing. I played, always trying to roll that 20 charisma. I guess with stuff like this, though, we could potentially find a consistent group to not only play, but broadcast it out to the world, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I would love the time to play consistently right now, but I don't have it.
You got the charisma in real life then.
Yeah, the fact that you guys are able to get together, and stream on a consistent basis, just even trying to get 3 people's schedules together can be so hard. Like, I bet you could work out the D&D thing.
Yeah, it can be pretty difficult at times.
Yeah.
So I guess one of the things that I really wanted to talk about is where you actually started writing. When did you decide that you actually enjoyed writing?
Yeah, I always knew that I liked stories, like ever since I was a kid. Like I was definitely one of those kids who was definitely an indoor kid and spent most of my time like reading or, watching TV, or I got a, PlayStation 1 when I was in middle school and played a lot of Tony Hawk and Spider-Man. And when I was, 9, 10, 11 years old, I really wanted to be a novelist someday. And then when I kind of got to high school, something got into my head where I was like, oh, I'm not allowed to do that. Like, you need to be like a particular kind of like formal writer and go to formal writing school. And for whatever reason, that's not something that I can do. I don't know why that was a thought that I had, but it just seemed like insurmountable. And so I sort of started to focus more on performance, and, acting as a way of storytelling, and did that for, high school, college, and then moving out to LA for it. And that's kind of what brought me back to writing, is I wanted to write something for myself to perform and to sort of be in charge of the whole story of it. And that's how I started the Bright Sessions. And the pilot of the Bright Sessions is the first script that I ever wrote. Like I had written, short stories and half-finished novels and stuff throughout my youth, but I'd never actually sat down and like written a script before. But because I didn't have to worry about any visuals, I was like, I'm an actor. I know how dialogue between two people is supposed to sound. Like, I think I can figure this out. And I made the premise like simple enough that I didn't have to like think about complicated plotting or transitions or anything like that. And then I, for the past 6 years of doing that, I've just been learning, and just like holding on for dear life, in terms of figuring it out, which I think, I don't know if you guys have had this experience. I think that that's the experience that a lot of podcasters have, right? Because unless you come from public radio and sort of got into the experience of like taking a radio show and turning it into a podcast and sort of that transition point, most of us are just like, we're just Googling stuff, right? Because there was no like formal education you could get for podcasting until recently.
I was going to ask you about the writing. How different is it when you go to write something, that's going to be an audio only? You don't have to worry about the visual aspect, like you said, but even comparing like something that you're like a short story you're writing, how do you get into writing for a podcast?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference is like with a short story or a novel or anything that's prose, your reader can know whatever you want them to know. You can sort of pick a perspective that is, God POV, third person, where all of the information that's sort of observable and characters' emotions can all be out on the table, or you can do like a super, internal monologue type POV and know everything a character is thinking and feeling at any given time. And you certainly can do those things in podcasts. Like, there are a lot of great fiction podcasts out there that have narrators or some sort of like, voice of God kind of bringing us along this journey. But I really wanted it to just be dialogue and character conversations. And so I think the hardest thing sometimes is like knowing that I know what a character is thinking and feeling as I'm writing dialogue, but figuring out how to make sure my audience knows what I want them to know at any given moment, if that makes sense.
I've really been enjoying the Marvels podcast. I was a big fan of the series, and I know it's a little bit different because you're writing for characters that people know, and the story's already been written. How did you convert that into an audio podcast?
A lot of like development with Marvel producers, and like figuring out, like, it's so funny when I think about my original pitch for that show. It's like light years different from what we ended up with, because we sat in a room for a week in New York and just kind of like went through my proposal and picked out the stuff that we thought we could do, and picked out the stuff that maybe would be too complicated or need too much knowledge or deviated too much. And it ended up actually all being about basically like this one panel that's actually in the original FF Galactus invasion from the 60s, which is that like a J. Jonah Jameson headline of Galactus a hoax. And we were like, let's make the whole show that. And let's make it an investigative journalism podcast, because that's something that like with something like Marvel, you have to have the understanding that like there are going to be people who hopefully are listening because they enjoy my work, and so they're used to audio fiction and they're coming to listen to something that I'm doing. But the majority of the audience is going to be Marvel fans who maybe have or have not listened to an audio fiction before, and so giving some degree of like framework around that of like someone's investigating a thing and they're journalists and we sort of know what that story feels like, can help kind of make people comfortable in the audio space. But easily the hardest thing was like figuring out how to write the Galactus invasion with like knowing that our amazing sound designer, Misha Stanton, who I've worked with for many, many years, would do an amazing job designing all of the crashes and the stumps and Galactus's voice and all of this stuff. But that, we still had to understand sort of physically what was happening without the people on the street being like too exposition-y. And then also like, trying to figure out like, how do we depict the Silver Surfer coming through a sky of fire, right? Like when the characters have no idea who that is because he's like, it's his first appearance. So I honestly, like, whenever I was in doubt, I just would return to the original 1960s comic, because the great thing about old comics is that a lot of times the characters literally say like, who is that silver man soaring through the sky? That they are kind of expositioning. And so kind of like leaning into those moments where I could.
Comics have really gone away from that exposition. They used to like throw everything at you.
Yes.
Which is, I love how podcasting has taken on this fictional these stories, because back in the day you had radio dramas, but to listen to them you had to listen to them on a cassette tape, or you got the CD or the record story. It's great that this medium has picked up on it, and I'm so excited for that.
Yeah, what were all of your like first forays into sort of audio fiction? Was it like listening to old radio dramas, or was it like a podcast over the past 10 years?
For me, well, definitely the old Star Wars radio dramas.
Oh, nice.
Listen to those a lot as a kid.
Yeah, I remember those used to come on records, so you had to flip them over, and and you only got, I guess, 45 minutes. It was a limit. So, I listened to old radio drama. Green Hornet was one of them. Back in the day, I think I found some old cassettes. But yeah, that's cool that you can grab them on demand now, and potentially anybody could create them.
Yeah. I think my first experience was probably just audiobooks in general, books on tape, and, starting out in the 90s and stuff like that whenever I was younger. But honestly, the first actual audio drama that I listened to as a podcast form is the Bright Sessions. So
really?
It really is.
Oh,
It kind of got me into this avalanche of trying to find others. And I've found so many others that are out there, and the genre is growing, which is amazing. And it's really fun to find new voices in not just podcasting, but just storytelling in general.
Totally.
So let's talk about a little bit of the Bright Sessions, bringing up the Bright Sessions first off. So obviously your first like step into audio fiction, kind of go over the process. Like there's a lot of people that you still work with today, and you started Atypical Artist, and you still have, I know Brigham Snow is there with you. I know that you work with Julia Marzala a lot. Kind of go over the steps that you took to get the Bright Sessions up and running. Like, was it dependent a lot on people you already knew, or were you going out and finding other people within the same community and just building relationships?
In the beginning, it was entirely based on people that I already knew. And I will say that, like, I'm such close friends with Brigham and Julia now. Like I was in Brigham's wedding party, like he's like my brother practically. And Julia and I have had like, she's like been my muse for, 6 years. But when we started the Bright Sessions, I had just been in acting class with them for about 8 months. And I really loved watching them act in class. And when it came time to like think about the characters I wanted to write and who those people might be, I decided to just like send them both a Facebook message being like, hey, like, I don't know how busy you are, but like, would you want to do this thing? It would be really easy. You just come over, record for like a couple of hours. It would be no pressure on you, trying to make it as like seamless as possible because I couldn't pay anybody. Right. And I was just like, and audio fiction wasn't like a big thing at that point. So it wasn't even like it was necessarily an opportunity that could lead to more things, because it was truly just like an experiment. Because when I asked them, like, Limetown and the Black Tapes hadn't even come out yet. Like it was, Serial was just hitting it big.
Yeah. And Black Tapes is amazing. I love Black Tapes.
Oh, Black Tapes is so good. And Paul and Terry are just like,
yeah.
I'm sure we'll talk more about sort of the industry as a whole, but just like the audio drama industry has been so kind, and like, yeah, Paul and Terry have just been like great sort of pals throughout the years. And it's so nice when you enter an industry and like the people who are already established like want to lift you up instead of viewing you as a competitor.
Right.
But yeah, the original cast of the Bright Sessions was me and 3 other people. Regan and Julia were from acting class. I had met Anna Laurie, who plays Chloe, in a UCB acting class like a year prior, and we'd become best friends. And so like she was sort of the one person I knew I wanted to work with. And so I wrote Chloe for her. Whereas for Julia and Brigham, I wrote Dr. Bright and Caleb, and then was like, oh, these 2 people from acting class would actually be perfect. And throughout the run of the Bright Sessions, I think like 80% of the actors were from that acting class or like friends that I met through those friends, like Ian, who plays Agent Green and who actually produces with Misha Stanton, my sound designer, Star Tripper, which is like a fantastic audio comedy. I met Ian through Anna because they were in a production of Rocky Horror Picture Show together. So it really was just like an actor forward experiment. And it was only in halfway through season 2 when Misha Stanton, who created Ars Paradoxica and Sound Design Marvels, as I said, and has done so many incredible things, that heard my season 2 like Patreon plea. And part of it was I want enough money to hire a sound designer because I don't know what I'm doing. And they reached out to me and said, I live in LA too. And I also have an indie podcast. Like, would you want to get coffee? And we were both very much at the beginning of our careers and kind of came up together, which was really nice. But before that, I was truly just watching YouTube tutorials about how to use Adobe Audition and making sound effects myself. Like all of the footsteps and open closing doors, everything was all recorded in my parents' house in New York. Sam's time travel sound is just me going into a microphone and then distorting it. So it's like
sound design.
It was as DIY as it can possibly get.
But sometimes those are the best parts of it because you would never know unless you were explained.
Totally.
So Erica did have a comment. She said she just wanted you to know that she loves the Bright Sessions.
Oh, thank you, Erica.
So I guess one of the big things that we talk about specifically, obviously this is a community-based show. We are, building communities within Houston and Texas and, throughout the whole country, world, really, at this point. But I think that's one thing that you're kind of hitting on specifically is build your community. And for you, it was specifically building your community within the actors that you knew, within people that you knew you wanted to work with.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty interesting because a lot of people just think, oh, well, I'm going to go and make some Facebook post or I'm going to try to go somewhere and just ask for anybody. But
right.
I mean, you can't necessarily know for sure that those people are going to be, first off, trustworthy, second off, a good fit with you, and you are actually going to have chemistry. So
yeah,
it seems like you already knew that you had chemistry with the people that you were going to be working with. So that helps out a lot.
Yeah. And, I got really lucky in the sense that like a lot of the original cast ended up becoming really close friends. But like, there are also people that I've worked with who are incredibly talented and who are so wonderful to work with. And like, we don't become best friends. And that's also great too. And just having that like external network of people. And then also the people that I meet just through being an audio drama producer or conventions, like I met you at a convention, Jared, and like the people that you sort of meet and then like you help each other out or you give each other advice or you give each other intel, but you don't work together formally. And that's something that has been so helpful to me throughout the years of the people that I've never done a project with, but who I can, knock on their virtual door and say, hey, like this person reached out to work with me or to, asking this question or whatever. I know you worked with them on this, like, what was that experience like? And it kind of helps keep the ecosystem this like nice place of friendly people who are nice to work with.
Right. So I know that you have a little bit of a tight schedule, so I know that we're coming up on the hour, so I want to go ahead and start wrapping it up so that you can go and get on with your busy schedule. But are there any specific things that you want to talk about, either with writing or with podcasting in general? Where do you think podcasting is going?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is something that I wanted to pick y'all's brain about, of just in talking to so many people in podcasting and having this society of people who are in various facets of it. Where do you think podcasting is going? And like, what have you observed? Because I think every other day I'm like, I have no idea where this industry is going. And then the next day I'll be like, okay, this is what's going to happen 6 months from now.
This is definitely something we've talked about a lot. It's it's going into, a lot of it's going to video, but it's becoming such a wide, everybody knows what a podcast is now.
Right.
When I first started, everybody's like, oh, I have to have an iPod. It's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
There's a new show with Martin Short and Steve Martin where they're podcasters. And that's amazing to me.
It's so good. I love it.
Yeah. So I think it's just going to be more and more in the zeitgeist of what everybody knows, and that's where they go for entertainment now. It's podcasting. All the big companies are going after them, you know, and celebrities, definitely celebrities.
Well, I mean, this is like a constant discussion in audio fiction, especially of like the celebrity cast podcasts and whatnot. And like, I've been extremely fortunate to, work with actors I've been in class with, and then also, do Passenger List with Kelly Marie Tran and Patti LuPone. Like, that was a surreal experience as a musical theater nerd. And like Bridgewater right now with Misha Collins and Nathan Fillion and all these people who are famous because they're incredibly talented. And so they're like amazing to work with as actors. But there's always a discussion around like when big companies get in and when there's a celebrity focus, like, is there a fear of the indie scene being edged out? Right. And like, and what even qualifies as indie in an industry that like has been majority indie for so long.
Right.
And then a lot of the people who, started as indie, or maybe like, I never know how to categorize myself in terms of like, I think Atypical is an indie company, but like, I've written for Marvel. So it's like, am I an indie creator? Like, I just don't know. And I'm curious if that's something that you guys talk about in terms of any fears or anxieties around the indie podcasting scene changing in a negative way, or if it's like, the more the merrier, as long as people are getting into podcasts, we're sort of all winning.
I think that's generally the idea that we kind of fall to, is that the more the merrier. Obviously, there's so much time that people can listen to podcasts. So if you're trying to compete with a celebrity on their show, obviously the celebrity is going to get a little bit more face time. But really, in all honesty, there's enough to go around. And if you develop your niche and you develop your content well enough, I mean, you're going to make it. It will be something that people look for your content. I mean, take me, for example. I started out with Bright Sessions, and I've listened to pretty much every single show. It's, Bridgewater is just amazing. Again, I absolutely really love it.
That.
So,
I think you made a point. Good is good, no matter if you're a celebrity or, just someone starting out. You never know who's going to come out of nowhere and be like, oh, whoa. And I think that's the beauty of it. It could come from anybody. Celebrity or not, trained actor, trained journalist, or just a good storyteller that maybe undiscovered, but they have the accessibility to this beautiful medium that allows them to get it out there. I think that's what I love best about it. I've always preached, if you have a voice, if you can talk, you can podcast, and I've always loved that.
And Jared, you make a great point about if you find your niche, people are going to come to it, no matter if there's celebrities out there, because they're not going to be covering the same things that you are.
Yeah.
There's no celebrities that are covering what I do or what you do. So they tend to stay in their own little lane and interview other celebrities a lot. So
that's, the finding your niche thing is I think hits the nail on the head completely. And I think that's what I love about podcasts is like, I actually, I'm working on the early stages of Bridgewater season 2 right now. And I'm sort of like trying to get like a smorgasbord of like mythical research that beyond like what I've already done and sort of like dive into some like more specific, deeper things. And like, yeah, I just like plugged in some search terms to my podcatcher, and like lo and behold, there's, you know, plenty of podcasts out there that are talking about the very specific thing that I was like looking for information and perspective on. And yeah, as long as human beings are like, you know, finding strange niche things to be excited about, like I think that there will, you know, there's no ceiling to the number of podcasts that can exist.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a very good point, because you're talking about, you know, searchable SEO and actually writing out show descriptions. Don't just put a title and a couple words, write out some show descriptions. I think that's big.
Absolutely.
Keywords for sure.
Keywords. Yeah. Keywords in your title, keywords in your description, everywhere.
Yep. And even that, like refreshing that stuff, I think is so important too, because like with each big move made by, you know, the big podcatchers, something changes in the way that things are cached and in the way that the SEO is working, that it's like, oh, now there's this new thing that I need to go in and shift, because now they're pulling, you know, SEO from the subtitle and not the description or whatever it is. It's like, it's been interesting to sort of watch that shift over the past, you know, 6-7 years.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. Okay. I know we're cutting it close on time, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up. So one thing that I do want to talk about specifically, I am going to be part of Podcasters Kit 2021. You can find it at inspiredinfluencers.com. I think it's coming out in November. So stay tuned for some updates, and I'll get you all the links and everything like that. I have an ebook that I'm going to be providing for people. So if you're looking to start a podcast, and it's going to cover pretty much everything you need to actually start a podcast. So make sure to watch out for that. So, all right, Lauren, thank you so much for joining us. We had a great time talking to you.
Yeah,
and thanks so much for having me.
Did you mention you have a book coming out as well?
I do, yeah. I have the third book in my Bright Sessions trilogy, Some Faraway Place, comes out next Tuesday, so the 28th. You can pre-order it now. And yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. That's amazing to know about that podcast kit thing, because I get emails all the time being like, where are resources that I can learn how to make a podcast? So I'm going to add that to my list of things to send people to. And yeah, it was just great to chat with you guys. Thank you for this.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and pop up our social media. You can find us at HipsHTX. That's all social media platforms. We are on TikTok now, and you can email us hipshtx@gmail.com. All right. Well, that's going to do it. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to next month's episode.
Alrighty.
Lauren,
have a good one.
Bye.
Thank you.